that we have to collect and provide primarily to Treasury in this case, and then the reporting interval that we will need to collect that from you all, how you will report that to us, and when we need that. So generally, reports are going to be due on the 15th day after the reporting period closes. So for monthly reports, your report is due on the 15th day after the month closes. As displayed in that at a glance view, there are three sort of primary buckets of reporting information. This will look familiar generally to folks who were part of our reporting discussion about a month ago. We've updated some of this and tried to accommodate or be responsive to feedback we received. So there's the project expenditure and programmatic data, which will require from everyone. And then there's some unique data elements, as Stephanie said, that'll apply depending on your U.S. Treasury expenditure category. There's the subaward data, so any money that goes outside of your agency, what do we need to know about that? And then finally is the performance reporting, the performance data that all contribute to both the annual performance report to U.S. Treasury, as well as just helping us as a state better understand the impact of these funds so that we are better prepared and understand how to respond in the event of a future disruption like this. So to talk about the project reporting, the basics here, U.S. Treasury, this is driven heavily by what U.S. Treasury needs because it gets into some granular details. They need unique financial information and programmatic information for each SFRF project. We are reporting to them basically if there is a unique agreement with your agency for a specific project, that project is something that we're going to report on to Treasury, and we need information at that project level to fill out those reports. There's a standard set of questions that we're going to ask of everybody, and then there are some unique questions depending on your expenditure category. And then finally, we are going to facilitate all reporting through Pangram. There's going to be some data elements that you will directly input into Pangram on your expense reporting page. And then there's some information that will be uploaded through attachments on the upload page in Pangram. We already talked about reporting schedule, but the big picture or big message here is that we are generally using monthly reports and annual reports. All right, so let's get into the specific data elements. And again, we will provide, these slides will be available. We're recording this, and we will, of course, go into much more detail on each of these, on these items in the reporting handbook. So don't feel like you have to take copious notes as you go along, but just wanted to give you all an overview of the actual data that we will be asking for based on current U.S. Treasury guidance. So we need to know current period expenditures, and those will be broken out by expense categories or expense types, which will help us identify sort of at a project level what funds were used for administrative purposes, what were used for staff, what was used to support subgrants and beneficiaries, and so on. Again, more detail to come. We need to know current period obligations. As we discussed last month, obligation here does not perfectly match up with encumbrances. Obligation, though it may, the obligation amount will not will always go up. So anytime your agency has committed funds or spent funds, that amount is going to be what's obligated under U.S. Treasury. So they want to know as we approach the December 2024 deadline for all SFR funds to be obligated, they want to know how much of the SFR funds have actually been obligated. So that's just that'll be a cumulative total over time, and so we're going to ask about that each month. There are questions about capital expenditures and program income. Depending on your response to that, there's some follow-up questions. And then if you have any subaward activity, as I mentioned, if you have committed or spent any funds outside of your agency, that would trigger this an additional report that would be through an attachment, which gets into the more detailed data requirements. As we've mentioned, there are some unique questions depending on your expenditure subcategories defined by U.S. Treasury. For small business programs, they need to know on a quarterly basis what's the total number of small businesses served. So since this is going to be a monthly report, we're going to ask you to keep a cumulative total of unique businesses served under your program. For our infrastructure projects, we will need to follow up with you. There's some additional reporting elements. For water infrastructure, it's largely information that we need at the beginning of the project. For broadband infrastructure, the guidance that U.S. Treasury sent out this past Friday added a whole bunch of stuff that we need to sort out for what's in there. So we're trying to make sense of it. We will follow up with our DIT friends to figure out exactly how we'll operationalize that. And then finally, for projects categorized under revenue replacement, which is most of the projects, of course, the information that we are asking of you all, I want to be clear, is not explicitly required by U.S. Treasury. However, U.S. Treasury has said that they are considering adding new reporting requirements on the revenue replacement projects, and so we want to try to get ahead of that. This is also going to be helpful information so that we can assess the impact and reach of all these programs and be responsive to questions, particularly from the legislature and other oversight entities that want to understand the performance and impact of the funding. So you'll have the opportunity to identify what your primary service metric will be. So adopting what Treasury uses for other categories, that will be broken down by households, small businesses, individuals, nonprofits, other entities. You can really define who your primary audience is or your primary constituency is. You tell us what that metric is, and then you tell us how many folks have been served over that reporting period. All right, moving into subaward reporting. The magic number here is $50,000. We discussed this a little bit last month, but U.S. Treasury is requiring reporting on any funds that your agency commits or pays to other entities, including contractors, subgrants, or beneficiary programs. This is going to also have to capture money that you spend on your Staples run to pick up more paper. We'll get into what the thresholds are, but the short version is anything, any entity that you are committing or paying less than $50,000, all of that just gets reported in aggregate. Anyone that you are committing $50,000 or more to will need some additional detailed reporting. This is coming from U.S. Treasury. This is a modified version of the FFATA reporting. For those who are familiar with FFATA, it's federal law that is intended to track where federal money goes and how it's spent. So rather than the $30,000 threshold for SFRF, Treasury is using some modified FFATA rules, which increases that threshold to $50,000. And here with this table, you can see what the nature of the information is that's required, depending on how much is being paid out and what the entity is. I'm going to reiterate this several times. Payments to individuals, including payments to sole proprietorships, get reported in aggregate, regardless of their relation with the $50,000 threshold. We have made a flow chart to help you all decide or make the determinations of for subaward reporting, what needs to get reported and where. So we're going to walk through this in a little bit more detail right now. Hopefully, get ahead of what will be definitely a big area of focus for reporting. So first question is, have you made any new obligations or expenditures to another entity during that reporting period? If the answer is no, you do not need to submit any new info. If the answer is yes, then you move on to the next question. Is the entity an individual? So did you send money to an independent contractor who's running a sole proprietorship, or is it a beneficiary program that you're running? If the answer is yes, then you are going to report that information in aggregate. I will show you the template. We'll demo it in just a few minutes where you can report that, but that all gets reported in aggregate. Now, if it's not an individual, then the question is the expenditure or obligation part of a total subaward that is less than $50,000? If the answer is yes, then that information also gets reported in aggregate. If it's on a subaward that is greater than $50,000, you move on to the final level of this decision tree, and this is where you'll need to provide detailed information about the entity that is going to receive the funds, how much is being committed to them over what period, and so that's on the obligation side, and then on the expenditure side, how much money have you paid out to them? What are the dates of those expenditures? So these are the actual data elements that are included in that subaward reporting for entities receiving over entities receiving $50,000 or more. So we need subrecipient name. We've talked about in the past this issue around UEI or tax identification number. For the time being, we can use TIN. And so if entities, particularly if they're contractors or subrecipients, there is a large queue for entities to get their new UEI. However, if they already had a DUNS number, that conversion should have been automatic, and they should be able to get that information. If there are entities that need to establish a new UEI, there's a long queue for that. And so because of this transition, Treasury recognizes that not everyone has what they need at this point, and so they're continuing to accept TIN. And for the time being, I would just say, do not delay payments to people who need it because of the UEI or TIN issue. We can use TIN based on what we've most recently received from Treasury. There's some additional information that's required around contact information. We'll talk about the SAM.gov registration in just a moment. For subawards, then you do need to assign a subaward number. That subaward number will be used to identify then obligations and expenditures unique to that subaward throughout the reporting period, throughout the SFRF performance period. There are subaward types. We'll discuss that a little bit as well. Again, more detail in the guidance to come out. And there's some additional things here on period of performance, place of performance. Again, if you're familiar with FFATA, there will be a lot of familiar elements. And then you do need to provide a brief description of what is the purpose of the subaward fund. So why are you providing that entity funding in excess of $50,000? And then a description of the subaward itself. So what are they? So first is the why, and then second is the what. What are they actually? What are the activities? Okay, that was a repeat slide. So for the SAM.gov questions, this has come up before. If the entity is not registered in SAM.gov, or you cannot verify, or they cannot verify whether they're registered in SAM.gov, that is fine. There are just some follow-up questions. So you have to answer no, and then the 2 follow-up questions are related to that entity's revenue from federal sources, federal monies over the previous fiscal year. If the entity answered yes to those previous questions, then the administering agency will need to get from the subrecipient the total compensation, names, and salaries for the organization's 5 highest paid officers if it's not publicly listed, if it's not publicly available. So there are many, if you are giving funding to a public university, or even in some cases a private university as an example, the salaries of their top employees may already be publicly reported on a 990 or whatnot. So there may be reasons that you wouldn't have to provide all of this. But again, so this is just something to think about and get ahead of as you are getting money out to other entities. Now for the under $50,000 reporting, this is a whole heck of a lot easier. You provide a subaward type, and that breaks down into contracts. So that'll be funding to entities that are providing services or goods. Grants, which would be your subgrants, entities that are carrying out a purpose for the original, why you all receive the money. Direct payments, which would be aid to beneficiaries, as an example. Transfers, which Treasury hasn't defined, but under CRF, that meant transfers to local governments. And then loans are pretty self-explanatory. And then so you will provide aggregate numbers based on the subaward types for obligations and expenditures. And then finally, subaward reporting for individuals. Like I said, payments to individuals are always, always, always reported in aggregate, regardless of the amount that's been obligated or expended on those awards. Treasury considers sole proprietorships to be individuals, so this should be included in here. And then all that they need to know is the total period obligation amount and the expenditure amount. So this is a screen grab of the subaward reporting template, and I'm actually going to pull up the current draft of the template to walk you through, just so you understand like what we've talked about, what the information is. We want to show you how this is going to be collected. Okay, try to zoom in. So we'll try to walk through just some examples, but the grayed out tabs here, so that there's going to be a certification page. This is just where you enter the information for the template that you are submitting for that reporting month. This will be pre-populated with, or I should say, the gray information will not change. So it's your award number, as assigned by NC Pro, the name of your entity. So as an example, I did Department of Agency, the expenditure category that you fall under, and then the total award amount as appropriated by the, or as defined in your MOU. You'll provide the reporting month. So if you're submitting, and the reporting month aligns with the month during which you were submitting the report, not necessarily the month that the activities took place. So if you were submitting a report today, your reporting month is June. The date of submission would be 6/16, and so on. The grayed out tabs or grayed out cells here will pull from other elements of the template, so don't direct input into those. And then we just need to know who's actually submitting this. In the document, we have basically a data dictionary. So every single field that is required has this information defining, the title, what's actually needed, if there are data validation issues that need to be factored in, and then it notes whether it's required, optional, or conditional. And then the that flowchart that we walked through is also provided here. And this makes specific references then to the tabs that you would need to use depending on those circumstances. So this is the subrecipient over $50,000 page. So this is just information about the subrecipients themselves. So this is where you'd provide your reporting month, the UEI or TIN, subrecipient name, the contact information, and then answer the SAM.gov questions. And that's really it for this page. The next is getting into the subawards. So you would provide the subrecipient UEI or TIN. Again, the drop down for the reporting month. This is where you tell us what the subaward number is for that subrecipient. You identify the subaward type. The guide will have further definitions for those. You'll tell us the subaward obligation amount, the date that it was obligated. U.S. Treasury wants to know the primary sector being served by the subaward and has a drop-down menu for those items. And then they need to know the period of performance and where. And then the purpose and description that we just discussed. And then finally, the expenditures. So this is a separate tab. You'll tell us the reporting month again. This is where the subaward number needs to be consistent. So please be sure to have a consistent subaward numbering system. And then you'll tell us the expenditure start date, end date. It's fine if that's the same day. And then the expenditure amount. So that's it for the entities that are on subawards receiving over $50,000. For entities that are receiving less than $50,000, again, it gets reported in the aggregate here. You tell us if there are subgrants. You have a bunch of subgrants that are less than $50,000 and say they total $155,000 of obligations, and you've paid out $100,000 of that. So you just enter it that way. And then payments to individuals, similar. You just tell us the reporting month and then the total period obligation and whatnot. And so I inputted info just for that one, but you'll see that the information is auto-populating over here, and that'll be the case for anything that you put in. So that's the demo of the current draft of the subaward attachment. Wanted to walk you through it. Understanding it, this is all it's certainly overwhelming to us having to manage it, and certainly walking through the details. I could understand it being a lot of info today, but we really wanted to make sure that you saw really tangibly what is going to be required and where for this information. Back to the slide deck, that brings us to annual reporting. Annual reporting, we are still preparing guidance on this. As we said, we didn't get the final guidance or template for this from Treasury until last Friday. So we were working on rolling this out, but the short version is it'll look similar to the project planning templates that you all submitted early on in this process. Some things you can expect to need to speak to in the performance reporting will be the performance indicators. We can work with you on all of that if you need support identifying appropriate performance indicators. And then U.S. Treasury wants to know about how your project is promoting equitable outcomes. They want to know about labor practices and the use of evidence in the implementation of your SFRF projects. And then finally, there's some additional data. This is information that is actually part of the quarterly reporting to U.S. Treasury, but it's information that we just don't expect to change on a quarterly basis. So the primary population that you're serving as part of your project is unlikely to change potentially during the course of your entire project. And then similar with the structure of your assistance program or the agency's approach to using this funding, we wouldn't expect to change that often. So we're going to roll that into the annual performance report. Our ask of you will be that if these things do change more regularly, that you communicate that with your grants manager and that we can incorporate that into our federal reporting appropriately. But again, trying to reduce the monthly burden of reporting here. And that's it. That's all for the reporting. So just as we wrap up, we want to highlight a few items here. So we will be providing you detailed guidance as part of this reporting handbook, along with the actual templates that you'll be using to submit these various reports. Because this is all being facilitated through Pangram, we are updating the Pangram user guide, and we'll include that as part of the reporting handbook. And then finally, we will, when this all goes live, we will have a series of webinars available to help you all navigate these different reporting components and the what and when and how of it all. So with that, we can pause for questions, feedback. Again, we're in this together, where we're trying to coordinate this information on behalf of the state. And so if there are particular things that are going to make this easier on you all, we want to know. But we are doing our best to make this as easy as possible, given the pretty stringent federal requirements on reporting on these funds.
Thank you, Andy, and the reporting team. I know this has been a big undertaking to make sure we have everything that we need so that we can communicate it to you, even when Treasury changes some of that guidance. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, this is Christina Altio. I had a question regarding program income. What I read in the final rule FAQs is that their Treasury is allowing the addition method. I just wanted to confirm that that was accurate.
Yeah, if it's in the final rule, yeah. So the reporting piece of this will be if you do earn program income, we need to be aware of that, and then the follow-up questions really dig into well, what are you doing with that program income, and how is it serving the underlying purpose of the grant? But yeah, Stephanie, you may have other comments.
Treasury did issue some updates in their FAQs on program income. So Christina, I think we just need to verify that nothing changed in those FAQs.
Okay. And then one question also related to reporting. If we have a subrecipient that earns program income, would that also be reported for their subrecipient?
That is a good question, and I do not know the answer to that I don't know if Andy does, or we might have to look into that one.
Let's look into that one.
Yeah, we're not sure yet, but it could be a possibility, and we just wanted to ask the question how we would handle that.
Okay, we'll definitely look into that one and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your help.
No problem. Any other questions?
Hey, Andy, I did have a question regarding the templates. Is that submitted through Pangram? Is that what you was talking about? That's going to be uploaded as an attachment through Pangram in itself?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Regarding program income, from what I read a while back, that all program income must be reported, especially if your subrecipients will be receiving program income. It came up an aspect with actually our other team members, broadband, and also when it comes to water infrastructure with utility companies. So we will be tracking that.
I think that is appropriate, I will say that School of Government has answered this question a couple of times for some of the local governments. And as y'all know, the state and local fiscal recovery funds follow the same rules and follow the same guidance, and they are advising that you track program income and expend it. It has to be spent, added to the total award amount and expended on an eligible project. There was something that changed, so let us go back to answer, Christina, your question and double check with the FAQs. I know that it dealt with, they addressed program income in there. I just don't remember the specifics of it. I think that was the April 27th FAQ. Other questions that people have?
So Andy, on that template as well, I'm rolling off the previous month, right? I'm just talking about a snapshot as at a reporting period. I'm not continuously tracking that. I'll just keep that to the side for my annual review as far as reporting. So every month, I'm just talking about that month that I gave the city of Fayetteville $60,000. That's what I'm reporting. Not that I gave them $100,000 the month previous either. I'll do that just month to month. That's all I would do.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Month to month, we'll track the cumulative totals on our end based on that month to month. The only caveat on that is going to be if there, and this doesn't necessarily apply to the broadband projects, which we'll need to touch base on, but the reporting, particularly for the metrics for revenue replacement projects. Let me actually go back to that slide. There is an item where we want to track cumulative totals for that quarter. So some of these items, if it says cumulative in the programmatic description, in the data description, then it would be, we'll need you all to keep track of the cumulative total for that quarter and report to us that cumulative total rather than just the sort of absolute sort of whatever is new for that month, if that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense. And I'm standing by and ready for the conversation regarding water infrastructure. So whenever you're ready for that, I'll accept that information from you.
Yeah, sooner than later is good. We'll connect through Marquise.
All right.
Thanks for the question, CJ and Christina. Any others?
One suggestion for the Subaward. The Subaward try to use a combination of letters and number together, no space. If you use all numbers, sometimes Excel, it's over smart, may change that data type to a date or number. But actually the Subaward number is a text field. We prefer to keep that format. And it's not a strict rule, but if you can, just using combination of letters and the numbers together to name your Subaward.
And avoid having the number start with 0 whenever you can. We've run into, so all this has to go up into the U.S. Treasury portal, which requires a lot of bulk uploads, and it is a challenging process based on how the formatting ends up in their system. So we can, Youngjoon, that's a great point, and that's something we can probably address in the guidance as well, the suggested format or some parameters for subaward numbers.
Yeah, I like to tell people that the first time we uploaded the CRF report into the Treasury portal, we got 1,200 pages of errors. Not 1,200 errors, 1,200 pages of errors. They do not make it easy, and usually we can figure it out, but sometimes we have to come back to y'all. So we're trying to avoid that. I know we had a lot of back and forth with CRF. We're trying to avoid that with SFRF. Any other questions? So we anticipate again that we'll send out, you'll get your SOPs and the monitoring handbook if it's relevant through your grants manager today or tomorrow. We will make sure that the reporting handbook addresses the issues that y'all raised, and we'll probably revise that somewhat and send it out next week. It is a little bit different of a format than the others in that it's very organized graphically and tries to have tables so that you can really use it as more a reference as you do your reporting, which I hope will be very helpful. As much as we tried very hard to never have any changes to any of our documents, we're learning that, again, as Treasury releases different things and makes changes, that we're going to have to change some things. So we'll make sure y'all are aware of it when we do. We'll send out a notice. We'll also keep the updated documents on our website. But I did just want to make you aware of that. Thank you for your patience as we work through the best way to get you this information. Again, we're trying so hard this time to not repeat the mistakes of the past and make everything clean and make sure we're not having to come back and ask you guys for 1,000 different things. We've already begun our discussions with the state auditors because they are already auditing SFRF. So we're trying to make sure that we set realistic expectations for that as well in terms of what our expectations are, what we think you guys will have in place at this time, what you need more time, like performance measures. We already started talking about that today, and I was like, well, we're not going to have performance measures for some things at this point because we're still working out, what state agencies, how the programs work, what it'll look like, what we think the outcomes should be, things like that. So I think we're working very hard to make sure we have realistic conversations about it and that everybody's aware of the expectations so that we have everything in place that we need to have in place for Treasury, for General Assembly, for the state auditors, and, for our recipients and the beneficiaries, those who are trying to use this money to help the state recover. So we welcome any questions at any time. We welcome any suggestions. Again, even though we're 2 years into the pandemic at this point, we know that there are things that we're still learning. We met with other states a couple weeks ago and found out that we're not alone in this. We are actually they're actually facing similar challenges that we're facing. And, so I think we can all learn from each other. And again, we welcome your feedback. Thank you for your time. If you want to stay on, we're going to stay on for the next 13 or so minutes and answer questions, and more time if we need it to answer questions if people have individual questions or things they want to ask.